On the 7th of January 2022, Universal Studios Florida closed Revenge of the Mummy for an extensive refurbishment, announcing that it would reopen later this summer. The Mummy is undoubtedly one of Universal's most popular rides in the park, right behind Harry Potter: The Escape from Gringotts, so it makes sense that Universal would take the opportunity to refresh the experience before its new park, Epic Universe, opens in 2025. What does this refurbishment entail exactly? Well, Universal has had a history of refreshing its attractions through various means. For example, The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man went down for technical upgrades, as well as updating the media to HD with new projectors being installed back in 2012. In 2015, the Incredible Hulk coaster went down for a complete retracking and retheme of the queue, reopening in 2016 as a completely refreshed experience. Because of this, a lot of rumors about what a Mummy refurbishment will entail is derived from Universal's past actions. As far as projection and screen upgrades go, Mummy reopens in January of 2021 with new updated media after an almost 2-week closure. Because this is the case, people have speculated that this longer downtime will see something similar to the Hulk, having the attraction be either completely or partially retracked, which sounds quite plausible to me. People have even speculated that a small retheme may be occurring, taking out more dated elements that reference the 1999 film that the attraction is based on. However, something unexpected has happened recently, perhaps indicating a new but unforeseen direction that the attraction may take. If you follow Universal closely, you'll probably have seen the various tribute stores that they open in conjunction with seasonal events, and even going so far as to include a Jurassic World tribute store for the opening of the Velocicoaster. If you're interested in the brief history and a more in-depth look at these incredibly well-themed stores, I've done a video on that already, which I will leave a link to. However, as a store was expected to open with Universal's Mardi Gras event this year, a different one also appeared unexpectedly. Taking up the former exit gift shop, Sahara Traders, the Universal Monsters tribute store opened recently, celebrating Universal's most iconic supernatural villains, with a large part of the shop being dedicated to the Mummy films of the 1930s. Is this a sign for more significant changes than people were speculating? Let's explore that topic today, and see why it may actually be a feasible surprise. Universal's monster films helped define cinematic horror throughout the 1930s, and all the way through the late 1950s. Starting in 1931 with Dracula, these films would come to define popular American conceptions of these characters, most of which are derived from literature. For example, releasing in the same year, the creative liberties of the film Frankenstein would influence almost all popular depictions of the monster. In the original novel as penned by Mary Shelley, the monster produced by Dr. Frankenstein is constructed from raw materials gathered from the dissecting room and the slaughterhouse, and reanimated through a vague process of imbuing inanimate objects with a life force. However, in the film adaptation, the monster is different, portraying Dr. Frankenstein as a grave robber who is sewing together various body parts into a single individual. This corpse is then reanimated through the use of electricity, with the iconic bolts on the monster's neck becoming popular in other depictions of the monster. There are a number of other fundamental differences as well, but the point is that Universal's monster films have defined almost all visual and narrative representations of these characters for almost 90 years. When we walk into the Universal Monsters tribute store, we see some of the more popular characters on display. Out in front, we initially see a rendition of the cursed and mummified priest, Imhotep, from the 1999 film. This film, which the ride is based around, was a reboot of the 1932 original. However, as you enter the store, the first half focuses heavily on Egyptian artifacts and theming. Most of the props are still in the same place as they were when the store was still Sahara Traders, now enhanced with cobwebs and different lighting though. Otherwise, certain props are moved from other areas of the store. One of these is the mummy found in the sarcophagus, depicting actor Boris Karloff playing the 1930s version of Imhotep. However, as you travel further, the store begins to depict other villains from the other Monsters films. In one corner, a skeletal version of the villain from the Phantom of the Opera is the focus of a well-designed set piece. The largest room of the store also features other various monsters that have become iconic through their own films. For example, the villain of Creature from the Black Lagoon, Gillman, is portrayed standing at the bottom of a river. To his left is Dracula, and to his left, behind the checkout counter, shoppers will see the Invisible Man. In another area of the store, the Wolfman is seen emerging from a crashed carriage. Finally, up by where the exit to the Mummy used to be, the Bride of Frankenstein's monster can be seen trying to reanimate him with electricity. Universal monsters are incredibly popular and have been attempted to be rebooted a number of different times throughout the decades. With those reboots came new ideas for attractions, as it was rumored that Islands of Adventure was slated to expand with a Van Helsing attraction taking place inside of Dracula's castle, and using a Cuckoo Arm ride system based on the 2004 film. Oddly enough, this plot of land was used for Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, recycling this concept if it really did exist. A few years ago, it was rumored that Revenge of the Mummy would be rethemed to the 2017 reboot of the franchise, before flopping at the box office just like Van Helsing did. Do I think that this refurb of the Mummy will embrace that film? I'd say highly unlikely. However, the more classic version of the Mummy actually seems a lot more plausible. Let's explore that in a bit more depth next. Do a lot of people still watch these classic monsters films? Not really. Yet, Universal has managed to tap into a cultural fascination with these creatures. Perhaps these films aren't being as watched as frequently as the popularity of the characters would imply, but I believe a large reason for their iconography is how they've permeated popular culture, regardless of whether people have seen the films or not. As mentioned earlier, certain visual depictions specifically from Universal films have defined popular conceptions of these monsters and stories, even if they're quite different from the source material. As a testament to this, Universal Orlando's Halloween Horror Nights premiered a house called Universal Monsters in 2019, sending guests into encounters with Universal's most iconic creatures. However, as you can see, these versions of the monsters are significantly scarier, showing how they can retain certain iconic characteristics, yet still be updated for contemporary audiences. In 2021, a successor to this house premiered, named The Bride of Frankenstein Lives. This house was more narratively structured, working as a sequel to the film Bride of Frankenstein, yet still using the more gruesome and intense style of the previous year's house. Undoubtedly, Universal Monsters is pretty popular, and it's strongly rumored that Epic Universe will contain a whole land based around this property, possibly reviving the Lost Cuckoo Arm attraction and having it be included among a few others. From there, the question arises though. If this land is what it is rumored to be, will the monsters there be tamer and based more on their early film versions, or will they embrace the intensity of Halloween Horror Nights? If they are more aesthetically intense, then this might be the perfect way to incorporate a new interpretation of the Mummy into the refurb for the attraction. The original Monsters house did include this scarier version of Imhotep, so I know that his design has at least been established. This land is also rumored to take place in Eastern Europe, and Universal hasn't been shy about spreading out IP among various parks, as they've done with the Wizarding World. Because this version of Imhotep wouldn't necessarily fit in a European setting, including him in this new version of the Mummy would make perfect sense for IP crossover between the parks, while making the attraction a bit more timeless. As much as I enjoy the inclusion of Brendan Fraser in the current version of the attraction, and enjoyed the 1999 reboot as an adventure film, the video portions of the ride just haven't aged well in contrast to the new animation and projectors. Including a more classic version of Imhotep would actually be rather easy, keeping most of the infrastructure of the ride the same. For example, the current premise of the attraction is that guests are stepping into the Museum of Antiquities and onto a film set for a fictional sequel to the rebooted film titled Revenge of the Mummy. Inside, guests can see props for the film, and a video on the TV screens around the queue convey that the filming crew has become superstitious about an Egyptian curse plaguing the set, acting as the cause for mysterious accidents. To protect themselves, the crew members have started wearing the symbol of the Magi, and have refused to serve coffee to Brendan Fraser on the set because he doesn't possess his own symbol. Skeptical of the curse, he steals the Magi symbol from a crew member named Reggie, and demands his cup of coffee. Reggie is then later shown getting into an accident as he becomes trapped in the sarcophagus. Once guests board the ride vehicles, they travel through an Egyptian set before hearing Reggie yelling and encountering Imhotep.
Are you insane? Get out of here! The curse, it's real! This whole place is a trap! He's after your soul! Look for the bad guys, people! It's your only hope!
Silence! With your souls, I shall rule for all eternity.
The rest of the attraction is essentially guests trying to escape, with the ending showing a video of Brendan finally getting his cup of coffee before realizing that he's having it handed to him by a mummified figure.
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed yourself. I would have enjoyed this interview a lot more if I had gotten my cup of coffee! Thank you.
By removing the film shoot theming of the first part of the queue and reskinning the animatronics within the ride itself, I can easily see a scarier version of Karloff's Imhotep being incorporated instead. Otherwise, the rest of the ride could remain pretty much thematically intact and still make sense within this new version. I think I've established that a retheme of this attraction could be plausible by shooting for a more classic version of the property. While the Brendan Fraser version is quite popular, the largest issue with the attraction is its storytelling. Despite being a popular ride, Revenge of the Mummy never really has a line long enough for guests to view the entire queue video, leading to confusion when Brendan pops up at the end unless you went out of your way to understand the story. The current version was also designed to fit in with the movie-making theme of the park, which has largely been abandoned over the last decade, making it stand out as a bit odd thematically. Seeing the ride be rethemed would initially be unpopular with the attraction's hardcore fans, but I think that a pivot towards Universal's classic version of the character would actually be more than acceptable. As anticipation for a potential land based on Universal monsters ramps up and continues to be a popular house theme for Halloween Horror Nights, bringing in this different version of Imhotep may actually be the perfect move to refresh the attraction for the foreseeable future. There have been a lot of wild rumors flying around about what may be happening, but I also suspect that the Universal Monsters Tribute Store isn't just a coincidence. If the Jurassic World Tribute Store arrived in conjunction with the Velocicoaster, then why would it be outside of the realm of possibility for the store to be working as a tease for a new retheme? Otherwise, the store is so out of left field that I doubt it's a coincidence. Regardless of whether Karloff's mummy is actually incorporated into the attraction though, I think it would make a lot of sense for a light retheme, and I would actually prefer it over the dated inclusion of Brendan Fraser, despite liking that version. Of course, I would also be interested in hearing what my audience has to say. Do you think that I might be right, and that the classic Monsters version of the Mummy might be coming to the attraction, especially with the tribute store being placed right next to it? If so, do you even think that it should happen, or should the current version essentially stay the same? I would be interested in hearing people's thoughts in the comments. As always though, if you enjoyed the video and want to help the channel out, I recommend hitting the like button, as well as subscribing with bell notification so as to be alerted when new videos are released.